Hey guys, tonight we begin with the grim, dangerous, and not so glamorous world of the Mafia boss. Those powerful figures who seem to rule from the shadows, making deals and demanding respect. While Hollywood makes them look cool, the truth is, being a Mafia boss seriously sucked. So, before we dive into the life and times of these notorious figures, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy our content. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always a joy to see how many people from around the world are ready for this journey. Now dim the lights, close your eyes, feel your body deeply relax, leaving the tiring day behind, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. When you think of a Mafia boss, you might imagine lavish estates, tailored suits, and absolute command. But for many, the reality was a tiny, gilded cage. It wasn't just a position of power. It was a test of enduring paranoia that came around every day, like an especially cruel warden who didn't believe in a moment of peace. Picture this. You're living in a mansion with walls so thick you could probably hear your own heartbeat from inside, but you're constantly wondering who's listening in. No real privacy, no genuine confidants, and definitely no moment free from the gnawing suspicion that someone wants your crown. The inside of your home was usually just a polite couple of degrees above whatever the temperature of your own fear was doing inside. If betrayal was brewing outdoors, it was politely slightly more suffocating inside. Congratulations. Nights were the worst. Darkness swallowed everything. The wind howled like an angry ghost, and the ringing phone or a sudden knock could instantly shatter any fragile moment of peace, doing its best to remind you that true rest was a luxury you couldn't afford. This isn't just about missing a good night's sleep. It's about a deep, corrosive form of vigilance that never truly turns off. Every face you saw, every handshake you made, every quiet conversation held the potential for betrayal. You were the boss, yes, but also the most exposed target in your own empire. The very air around you felt thick with unspoken agendas, secret alliances, shifting like shadows in a dimly lit room. Trust, a fundamental human need, became a dangerous weakness. It was a word stripped of its meaning, a luxury you simply couldn't afford. Imagine living with a constant low hum of suspicion, always analyzing, always dissecting. Was that casual glance from a loyal lieutenant a sign of respect or calculating assessment? Was the offer of a drink a friendly gesture or an attempt to lower your guard? The mind of a boss was a battlefield, not against external enemies, but against the specters of doubt and mistrust sown by those closest to you. The weight of this internal battle was often heavier than any physical threat. And then there were the golden handcuffs, the luxurious suits, the expensive cigars, the vast estates. They were not symbols of freedom, but rather ornate links in a chain. Your wealth, accumulated through illicit means, tethered you to a life you couldn't easily escape. Every diamond, every custom-built car, every lavish party served as a constant reminder of the high stakes, the visibility that made a quiet retreat impossible. The more you accumulated, the deeper you became entangled, the wider the target on your back grew. You couldn't simply walk away from millions, the family wouldn't allow it, and the outside world would never let you forget. You were trapped in a glittering cage where every comfort was a facet of your confinement. This wasn't power. It was a gilded prison, meticulously constructed by your own hands, brick by expensive brick, around your very soul. The quiet moments, those precious few you might snatch between calls and demands, were not truly quiet at all. They were filled with the echo of your own thoughts, a relentless inner monologue questioning every decision, every word spoken in your presence. You became an expert at reading micro-expressions, at detecting the slightest shift in loyalty, a skill honed by the constant threat of being undermined from within. This hyper-awareness was exhausting, a mental burden far heavier than any physical labor. It seeped into every aspect of your existence, making simple pleasures tainted with the acid of suspicion. A family dinner was a performance, a public appearance, where every smile had to be scrutinized for its authenticity. Every shared glance held a potential secret. Consider the isolation this creates. You sit atop a pyramid, but it's a pyramid of fear, not genuine affection or camaraderie. Every person below you is either a potential pawn, a rival, or a betrayer. There are no true friends in this life, only alliances of convenience, always subject to change based on who offers a better deal or who senses weakness. The loneliness of command in the criminal underworld is profound. You are surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, walled off by the very power you craved. This isn't the respect of true leaders. It's the cold, empty obedience of fear, and it leaves a gaping void in the human soul. This profound loneliness didn't just haunt the boss in their moments of solitude or in the sterile grandeur of their office. It seeped, like a silent, venomous gas, into the very foundations of their personal life, most poignantly, into their family. Imagine, if you will, the crushing burden of a double life, not just for yourself, but for those you supposedly loved the most. Every family dinner became a meticulously choreographed stage, every tender moment tainted with the unspoken, the unspeakable. How do you share a genuine laugh with your child, truly present in that fleeting moment of joy, when the shadow of your illicit world constantly looms, a silent promise of danger that could engulf them at any moment, the pure, unadulterated joy of a child's achievement, the simple comfort of a spouse's reassuring presence, all of it filtered through a thick, distorting lens of fear, a constant internal calculation of risk that never truly ceased. The inability to be truly present, truly open, was a wound that festered. The relentless need to shield loved ones from the brutal truths of your existence meant building invisible walls, even within the sacred space of your own home. You couldn't confide your deepest fears, the gnawing anxieties, your moral compromises, or the relentless threats that pursued your every step. How could you explain to your wife why a strange car might have followed you home, or to your children why certain questions about your business were absolutely forbidden? These unspoken secrets became a sharp, unyielding wedge, pushing you further and further away, creating an emotional chasm that no amount of material wealth or superficial affection could ever bridge. Love, in this life, became not a source of strength, but a profound liability, a vulnerability you fiercely guarded with every fiber of your being. Yet, paradoxically, in guarding it so vehemently, you slowly, inexorably destroyed its very essence. Your family lived in a bubble of carefully constructed half-truths, always physically close enough to feel your presence, yet infinitely distant from the grim reality that consumed your waking and sleeping hours. This fear for loved ones wasn't an abstract concept. It was a cold, constant knot in your stomach, a tightening sensation in your chest that rarely loosened. The chilling, ever-present dread that a rival, a disgruntled associate, or a relentless law enforcement agency might, at any moment, use your family as leverage against you. Every mundane school drop-off, every routine doctor's visit, every seemingly normal outing carried an insidious undercurrent of potential catastrophe. You might have commanded absolute deference and fear in the underworld, but at home you were perpetually a hostage to fortune, acutely aware that your life choices placed your most cherished ones directly in the crosshairs. The innocent laughter of your children could be silenced, the peaceful sleep of your spouse shattered, all because of the heavy, blood-stained crown you chose to wear. What kind of genuine, enduring peace could you ever hope to find, knowing that your every action, every enemy made, cast an even longer, darker, more menacing shadow over those you swore, in your own twisted way, to protect? And beyond the fragile circle of family, the void of genuine human connection deepened into an abyss. True friendship, that rare, precious bond of unconditional support, shared vulnerability, and mutual respect, was an alien concept in the boss's world. Every handshake was a calculated negotiation. Every warm smile a veiled assessment of utility or threat. Allies were temporary, opportunistic. Loyalty, a hollow commodity to be bought and sold, endlessly shifting with the tides of power and self-interest. Trust, you learned early and brutally, was not just a weakness, but a fool's game, a luxury you could not afford. The men around you, those who pledged their allegiance and swore their lives, were either secretly aspiring to your position, quietly resenting your power, or carefully, patiently planning their eventual exit from your orbit. There was no one with whom you could truly let your guard down, no one to share a moment of genuine human connection without the insidious suspicion of ulterior motives creeping in. This wasn't merely loneliness, it was an active, profoundly corrosive form of isolation, where even your closest associates were potential threats, making every relationship a strategic calculation rather than an authentic emotional bond. The hollow echo of your own words was often your only true companion. The cumulative effect of this constant vigilance, this profound emotional distance from loved ones, and this deep, profound lack of genuine connection was a relentless, all-consuming psychological toll that wore away at your very being. Chronic stress became your unwelcome baseline, a persistent hum beneath every thought. Anxiety was not an occasional, fleeting visitor, but a permanent, unyielding resident, gnawing relentlessly at the edges of your mind, a constant tremor in your soul. Sleep, that most fundamental human need for repair and respite, that sweet oblivion that allows the world to reset, transformed into a nightly, agonizing battle. The very moment your head hit the silk pillow, the day's anxieties, The myriad of threats, the faces of potential betrayers, would rush in, amplified by the suffocating quiet darkness. Every decision you had made that day, every word you had uttered, every potential threat or slight you perceived would replay itself endlessly on a cruel internal loop. The faces of those you couldn't trust would dance behind your eyelids, mocking your attempts at peace. Insomnia wasn't just a symptom. It was a cruel, sophisticated form of torture, denying you the very peace and mental clarity you desperately craved, leaving you perpetually exhausted, mentally frayed, and emotionally drained. The erosion of your moral compass, the brutal compromises made, the violence sanctioned, the lives ruined, all of it weighed heavily, a crushing, silent burden that contributed to a deep, quiet despair. A profound, existential emptiness that no amount of power, no amount of accumulated wealth, no amount of forced respect could ever alleviate. This wasn't a life of glorious command, it was a life of quiet suffering, a gilded cage constructed not just around your physical body, but around the very essence of your soul, slowly suffocating the humanity within. If the internal battle was a suffocating weight, the external pressures were the relentless, unblinking eyes of the world, constantly watching, constantly waiting. Once you chose the life of a boss, you entered a permanent, high-stakes game of cat and mouse with forces far more organized and patient than any rival family. This wasn't merely about avoiding a punch. It was about evading an entire system designed to dismantle your world, piece by painstaking piece. The primary antagonist, the one that truly kept you awake at night, wasn't a rival cap regime with a grudge, but the seemingly endless resources of law enforcement, a patient predator in an inescapable hunt. Consider the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Their presence wasn't just a distant, abstract threat. It was a tangible, ever-looming shadow that seeped into every corner of your existence. Every phone call you made, every private conversation you had in a safe location could be intercepted. Wiretaps were not a myth whispered in hushed tones. They were a chilling reality. Tiny, unseen ears listening to your every whispered command, every secret agreement. Imagine the immense mental discipline required to live knowing that unseen agents might be dissecting your pauses, analyzing your intonation, searching for the slightest slip-up in your carefully constructed web of lies and power. This wasn't just about avoiding direct questions. It was about living in a constant state of self-censorship. Every word a potential piece of evidence, every silence a possible confession. The very air around you, even within the supposed sanctuary of your own home, felt as if it hummed with the phantom presence of hidden microphones, a pervasive, chilling symphony of unseen listeners, never truly allowing peace to settle. And then there were the informants, perhaps the most insidious weapon in law enforcement's vast arsenal. These weren't outsiders you could easily identify. They were often men from within your own ranks, individuals you had broken bread with, shared secrets with, or even elevated. They might be compromised, coerced, facing decades in prison and offered a deal, or simply a disgruntled soldier or ambitious lieutenant whose loyalty was always conditional, seeing an opportunity to save himself or advance his own twisted agenda. The fear of an informant wasn't just about what they knew, but about the profound violation of trust, the ultimate confirmation that loyalty was indeed a fragile, fleeting illusion in your world. The slightest whisper of a rat could send shivers down the spine of even the most hardened, ruthless boss. It introduced yet another crushing layer of paranoia, another compelling reason to distrust every single face around you, subtly transforming your own organization into a potential trap, a nest of vipers. You could be sipping espresso in your favorite cafe, discussing business with a trusted associate, completely unaware that the man across the table, or even the seemingly innocuous waiter serving you, was secretly reporting your every move, silently sealing your fate. The meticulous gathering of evidence by state police and federal agents wasn't the dramatic, explosive, Hollywood-style raids you might imagine occurring every day. No, it was a far more patient, slow, grinding process. Years of surveillance, quiet, painstaking observation, building cases brick by brick from wiretap transcripts, from meticulously traced financial records, and from the damning testimony of informants. This quiet, persistent pressure was, in many ways, far more terrifying than open warfare. You couldn't fight what you couldn't see, couldn't directly confront an enemy who operated entirely within the bounds of the law, using intelligence and strategy rather than brute force. The feeling of being hunted wasn't just a sudden, adrenaline-fueled chase. It was a decades-long siege, slowly, inexorably tightening the noose, making every seemingly innocent activity, every casual encounter, a potential lead for the relentless authorities. Every car parked a little too long down the street, every new face in your usual restaurant, every official document that crossed your desk, Each was scrutinized, filtered through the hypervigilant lens of a man constantly under an invisible, pervasive threat. This elaborate, intricate cat-and-mouse game required not just cunning and ruthlessness, but an immense, utterly exhausting mental fortitude. You had to anticipate not just the unpredictable moves of your criminal rivals, but the systematic, calculated efforts of the state, an adversary with seemingly limitless resources and an unyielding will. One misstep, one fleeting moment of complacency, one unguarded word could unravel years of careful construction, crumbling your carefully built empire. The chilling stories of other bosses who thought they were truly untouchable, only to be brought down by a meticulously compiled dossier, served as a constant, stark reminder of your own precarious position. They were caught not in a blaze of glory, but often quietly, in the early hours of the morning, their vast empires collapsing, not with a dramatic bang, but with the subtle click of a recorder, the quiet, damning testimony of a turncoat, or the methodical, relentless review of ledgers. This isn't the romanticized image of defiant power. It's the stark, unvarnished reality of living with an invisible, omnipresent adversary, always one step behind, or perhaps always one step ahead, in a game where the stakes were everything, and the only certainty was the eventual loss of your carefully guarded freedom. If the authorities were the patient hunters, slowly closing their net, then rival families were the wolves at the edges of your territory, always circling, always testing the boundaries, ready to tear at any perceived weakness. The world of the Mafia boss wasn't just about managing your own enterprise. It was about constantly defending your turf, your rackets, your very existence, from those who sought to claim it all for themselves. This wasn't a static chessboard. It was a bloody, ever-shifting battleground where peace was always a temporary truce, easily shattered by ambition, a perceived insult, or a simple miscalculation. The quiet, systematic threat from law enforcement was one thing. The visceral personal danger from a rival boss was another entirely, often far more immediate, far more brutal, and undeniably more chaotic. Turf wars, despite their often violent outcomes, were rarely about grand cinematic battles. For the boss, they were about the subtle, constant infringements, a rival encroaching on a gambling operation, quietly intimidating targets of a protection scheme, or attempting to muscle in on a drug distribution route. Each of these seemingly minor incursions had to be met with swift, decisive action. Any perceived hesitation, any sign of weakness, was an open invitation for further, more aggressive acts. The mental strain of orchestrating these constant skirmishes, of devising countermeasures and ensuring your soldiers remained loyal and sufficiently ruthless, was immense. Every successful defense was only a brief, fragile reprieve, a moment to catch your breath before the next challenge inevitably arose. The territories weren't just lines on a map, they were the very lifeblood of your organization, the source of your wealth and influence. Their defense was a never-ending, mentally exhausting commitment, always fraught with the risk of escalating into open, devastating conflict that could cost lives, fortunes, and freedom. Within this brutal, competitive landscape, assassinations were not just a tool of power, but an ever-present, chilling specter that hung over your every waking moment. The quiet removal of a rival's key enforcer, the sudden, unexplained disappearance of an ambitious underboss, or the chilling public message sent by a hit on a specific target, these were the grim realities. As the boss, you were both the orchestrator of such brutal acts and the prime target for them. Every car ride, every visit to a seemingly innocuous restaurant, every quiet moment outside the fortified walls of your home became a potential ambush, a stage for a violent, sudden end. The simple act of stepping out into the world was transformed into a series of calculated risks. Each shadow seemed to conceal a potential assailant, each passing vehicle a delivery system for death. You learned to live with an almost preternatural sense of awareness, an animalistic instinct for danger, constantly scanning your surroundings, eternally bracing for the unexpected. This wasn't merely a display of bravado, it was a deeply ingrained survival mechanism, a silent, desperate prayer that tonight wouldn't be that night. The grim, unvarnished truth was that a violent, often undignified, and entirely premature end was not just a possibility, but a highly probable conclusion for a life lived under such constant external threats. Moreover, betrayals were not exclusively an internal affair. They were a pervasive element in the intricate web of interfamily politics. Alliances between criminal organizations were as fickle as the desert wind, prone to shifting with the slightest change in fortune, opportunity, or perceived weakness. One day, a sworn ally, a trusted partner in lucrative rackets. The next, a treacherous adversary, ready to stab you in the back for a larger, more tempting slice of the criminal pie. The intricate, often deadly dance of loyalty and deception between organizations was a constant, profound source of stress and anxiety. You were compelled to anticipate not just the overt moves of your declared enemies, but the potential, insidious treachery of your supposed friends and associates. This pervasive uncertainty fostered an even deeper sense of isolation, an inability to ever truly let down your guard, even when engaging in what appeared to be cordial meetings with other powerful figures. Every negotiation was a silent battle of wits, every agreement a temporary, fragile treaty, always implicitly containing an unwritten clause for ruthless self-preservation at any cost. The smiles exchanged across the table were often merely masks, meticulously hiding calculating minds that ceaselessly weighed your strengths and weaknesses, always looking for an opening, a vulnerability to exploit. This unceasing vigilance, this relentless onslaught of external enemies, and the ever-present threat of violence meant that genuine peace was an elusive, almost mythical concept. There was no true downtime, no respite, no moment when the crushing burden of your position could be genuinely set aside. Even during periods of apparent calm, the seeds of future conflict were invariably being sown, new rivalries quietly festering, old grudges simmering dangerously beneath the surface. The shadow of the past, filled with scores, settled and unsettled, always lingered, perpetually ready to resurface at the most inconvenient and often deadly times. An old enemy, once thought vanquished, might reappear through a vengeful relative. A past betrayal, seemingly forgotten, could inspire a new, brutal act of retribution years down the line. Your life was an intricate, dark tapestry woven with countless threads of violence, suspicion, and fear, and with every new thread added, the knot tightened further, never offering the slightest release. The psychological cost of this constant state of alert, of living under the perpetual menacing sword of rivalries and retribution, was truly immeasurable. It contributed significantly to the relentless erosion of your peace of mind, the continuous fraying of your nerves, and the deepening of your already profound isolation. Power, in this context, was not a formidable shield that protected you. Rather, it functioned as a powerful magnet for conflict, relentlessly drawing you deeper and deeper into a suffocating vortex of never-ending struggle. This relentless external pressure, seamlessly combined with the crushing internal paranoia, painted an undeniably grim and stark picture of a life that was far less about glorious command and far more about agonizing, unending survival. It was a life where the respect you commanded was not born of genuine admiration, but ruthlessly forged in fear, and the profound peace you so desperately yearned for was forever out of reach, always just beyond the next brutal turf war, the next calculated assassination attempt, the next inevitable soul-crushing betrayal. A life, when stripped of its superficial glamour, that truly, unequivocally sucked. If the constant gnawing presence of law enforcement and the savage dance with rival families presented a formidable, ever-present danger, then the threat from within your own ranks was something far more insidious, a poison seeping into the very heart of your supposed sanctuary. This wasn't merely an external assault. It was a deep, personal wound inflicted by those you had chosen, those you had trusted, those who called you boss. It was the ultimate betrayal, turning your closest allies into your most dangerous adversaries, and transforming the concept of loyalty into a cruel, elaborate deception. In this shadowy world, the most lethal dagger often came from a hand you thought was extended in friendship, a hand that might have shared a meal, a laugh, or even a moment of vulnerability with you. Consider, for a moment, the ambitious lieutenants. They were, in many ways, your mirror image, younger, hungrier versions of yourself, tirelessly working their way up the blood-stained ladder. They had seen your power, tasted its influence, and now they coveted it with a burning, relentless desire. Every order you gave, every decision you made, was not just executed but subtly scrutinized, weighed against their own aspirations. Were they truly loyal, or were they simply waiting, patiently observing for the moment of weakness, the slight misstep that would allow them to seize your crown, the very qualities that made them valuable, their cunning, their ruthlessness, their ambition, were the same qualities that made them a profound and ever-present danger. You nurtured their rise, gave them opportunities, yet knew with a chilling certainty that one day they might turn their sharpened wits and their loyal soldiers against you. This created an agonizing, perpetual dilemma. You needed strong, capable men to run your empire, to extend your reach, but those very men carried the seeds of your potential downfall within them, plotting in the quiet corners of your domain. Then there were the disgruntled soldiers. Perhaps they felt overlooked, their sacrifices unrewarded, their perceived loyalty unacknowledged after years of service, or perhaps a decision you made, a command you issued, directly impacted them or their loved ones negatively, fostering a deep, quiet resentment that festered in the shadows, growing with each passing day. These weren't the grand, ambitious schemers. They were the foot soldiers, the quiet resenters whose simmering discontent could be easily manipulated by a rival, or worse, by law enforcement. A man with nothing left to lose, or a man seeking vengeance for a perceived slight, could become the most unpredictable and dangerous element in your organization. A seemingly insignificant slight, a perceived injustice, could ignite a silent fury, transforming a once loyal follower into a willing informant, ready to dismantle your empire, brick by painstaking brick, simply to watch you fall. The weight of keeping every single man in your vast organization content, or at least sufficiently fearful to prevent rebellion, was an impossible, mind-numbingly exhausting task, a tightrope walk over an abyss of potential treachery. And of course, the ever-present shadow of the informant. Not just the anonymous rat from the street, but the one seated at your own table, sharing a meal, sipping espresso with you, nodding in agreement with your pronouncements. Law enforcement, with its endless resources, was always on the prowl, looking for cracks in the facade, searching for the desperate, the weak, the vulnerable, the greedy within your ranks. A man facing a lengthy prison sentence, or one with mounting debts, or even one simply weary of the bloodshed and the constant looking over his shoulder, could be turned. The offer of a reduced sentence, a new identity, protection for his family, these were powerful temptations, capable of corrupting even the most outwardly loyal. The thought that someone, anyone within your inner circle might be secretly cooperating with the authorities was a form of psychological torture that never abated. Who could you truly trust? Whose eyes held genuine respect, and whose held the cold, calculating gaze of a betrayer? This was not a question you could ever definitively answer, forcing you to live in a perpetual state of guardedness, even amongst your family. Every phone call, every meeting, every casual conversation carried the chilling possibility of being overheard, recorded, and ultimately used against you by someone you once called your own. This absolute lack of loyalty was not a flaw in the system. It was the system itself. The very foundation of your power was built on a shifting sand of self-interest and fear. Every oath sworn, every handshake sealed, every declaration of allegiance was conditional, dependent on your continued strength and ability to provide. The moment you faltered, the moment weakness was perceived, the moment a better offer presented itself, those loyalties would evaporate, replaced by cold, hard pragmatism. You understood this. You yourself had likely risen through similar acts of calculated opportunism, betraying those above you to secure your own ascent. And this understanding, this deep, cynical insight into human nature, was perhaps the greatest burden of all. It stripped away any illusion of genuine camaraderie, leaving you utterly alone at the top, constantly aware that the very hands that helped lift you could, in an instant, be the ones to pull you down. The loneliness born of external threats was profound, but the loneliness born of internal systemic betrayal was a chilling, soul-crushing emptiness, a stark reminder that, in the Mafia world, true loyalty was not just rare, but arguably non-existent. It was a life where trust was a weapon to be wielded, not a bond to be cherished, and every relationship was a transaction, a fragile agreement constantly on the brink of collapse. The insidious nature of internal betrayal extended far beyond the immediate threat of a coup or an informant's whispered confession. It burrowed deep into your very psyche, a pervasive, corrosive force that eroded your peace of mind from the inside out. You found yourself trapped in a relentless cycle of psychological warfare, where your own mind became both your greatest weapon and your most brutal torturer. Every interaction, every seemingly casual remark, every subtle shift in body language was meticulously cataloged, analyzed, and reanalyzed in a tireless, often exhausting quest to identify the next potential crack in your carefully constructed edifice of power. This was not merely about survival. It was about living in a constant state of hypervigilance where the very air around you seemed to vibrate with unspoken threats and hidden agendas. This constant questioning of motives became an inescapable habit, a mental filter through which every human exchange had to pass. Did that consigliere's advice truly stem from unwavering loyalty? Or was it a calculated move to subtly steer you toward an outcome that benefited his own clandestine agenda, perhaps even at your expense? Was the boisterous laughter of your capos at a gathering genuine camaraderie, or thin veil masking whispered conspiracies and simmering resentments, a sign of their impatience for your position? You became an unwitting master of human behavioral analysis, a grim Sherlock Holmes of the Azure underworld, forever searching for the telltale signs of disloyalty in the eyes of men who had sworn their lives, their very souls, to you. This was not a skill born of choice, but forged in the crucible of necessity, a desperate attempt to stay one step ahead of the knives that might, at any moment, be plunged into your back from within your own inner circle. The burden of this hypervigilance was immense, transforming genuine human connection into an endless series of cold, strategic assessments, each weighted with the potential for your downfall. The inability to truly relax was perhaps the cruelest consequence, a perpetual torment that touched every fiber of your being. How could you ever genuinely lower your guard, even in moments of supposed respite? The opulent dining room, once a symbol of your success and a place for gathering, became just another surveillance point, every servant a potential pair of listening ears, every shared meal a potential opportunity for poison or sabotage. Even the supposed sanctity of your own bedroom could be compromised. A hidden camera, a bug, a planted wire, a carefully selected confidant who was, in truth, an informer. The sheer mental gymnastics required to anticipate plots, to construct elaborate counter-strategies in your mind, to dissect every rumor and every slight, was a ceaseless and draining exercise that stole any semblance of calm. You were always several moves ahead in a deadly, invisible chess game, but the profound cost was an internal exhaustion that permeated your bones, making true rest an alien concept. Every quiet moment was not a reprieve, but an open invitation for your mind to race, to play out endless dark scenarios of betrayal and survival, robbing you of sleep, of focus, of genuine peace. Your dreams, when they came, were often filled with shadows, whispers, and the faces of those you couldn't trust, echoing the torment of your waking hours. Maintaining control through an iron grip of fear was undeniably effective in the short term, ensuring obedience and deterring overt challenges. But it came at a staggering unspoken price, a profound internal cost that slowly consumed you. You were revered, yes, but never truly loved, only feared. You commanded absolute obedience, but never genuine respect, which flows from admiration, not intimidation. The very fear you so ruthlessly instilled in others mirrored the fear that gnawed at your own soul, a constant, chilling reminder that your power was conditional, bought with intimidation and enforced by ruthless violence. The psychological toll of constantly having to project an unyielding front, a stone-cold demeanor that permitted no weakness, no vulnerability, was immense. This impenetrable facade, meticulously maintained day in and day out, built an unscalable wall around your true self, slowly suffocating the very humanity within you, leaving you emotionally barren. You became, in essence, a prisoner of your own creation, an emotionless automaton driven by the relentless, brutal demands of the life, forever sacrificing genuine human connection, moral integrity, and inner peace at the cold, unfeeling altar of raw, brutal power. The constant paranoia wasn't just a mental state, it manifested physically, a tangible, suffocating weight. It was the persistent tightness in your chest, the shallow, hurried breaths, an inability to ever truly settle your body or your mind, the slightest unexpected noise, a car backfiring outside your mansion, a sudden shadow shifting in your peripheral vision, an unannounced knock at the door, could send a violent jolt of adrenaline through your system, instantly snapping you back into a state of high alert, heart pounding, muscles tensed. This constant fight-or-flight response, maintained over years, was incredibly damaging, both to your physical health and your spiritual well-being. It chipped away at your capacity for simple joy, for genuine contentment, for the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. What remained was often a hollowed-out shell of a man, burdened by the crushing weight of a crown that offered only isolation and an unceasing, corrosive anxiety. Your entire existence became a bitter testament to the profound irony that absolute power, when wielded in the shadowed world of the Mafia, brings not ultimate freedom, but the most profound and inescapable form of personal enslavement, trapping you within the confines of your own suspicious mind. This, then, was the inescapable, agonizing psychological impact of internal betrayal. A life without a safe harbor, a mind without a moment's true peace, and a soul constantly at war with itself, always watching, always suspecting, always utterly and profoundly alone. It was the ultimate, bitter truth of being a boss, a truth carefully hidden beneath layers of manufactured glamour and whispered tales of formidable power. A truth that, more than any other grim reality, affirmed why, in the unvarnished reality of it all, being a Mafia boss truly, profoundly, and irrevocably sucked. Having navigated the treacherous labyrinth of internal betrayal, where trust was a luxury and paranoia a constant companion, one might imagine the life of a mafia boss to be a continuous drama of high-stakes power plays and cinematic showdowns. Yet, beneath the veneer of illicit glamour and whispered legends, much of the boss's existence was consumed by something far less thrilling, the relentless, often tedious, and profoundly stressful business of crime. This wasn't the stuff of thrilling novels. It was the unglamorous, day-to-day grind of managing an illegal enterprise, a bureaucratic nightmare cloaked in intimidation and violence. Imagine running a large, sprawling corporation, but one where every transaction, every decision, every link in your supply chain carried the very real risk of ending not in a quarterly report, but in a prison cell, or worse, a violent reprisal. That, in essence, was the daily reality of the mafia boss. It was a constant, exhausting balancing act, demanding the acumen of a CEO, the ruthlessness of a warlord, and the perpetual stealth of a phantom. This business, operating outside the rule of law, meant an intricate web of clandestine rules, convoluted layers of deception, and an exponentially higher degree of personal risk for every deal closed. The workdays were interminable, the clandestine meetings endless, and the spreadsheets in the minds of trusted or seemingly trusted associates were filled with numbers representing lives, freedoms, and livelihoods hanging precariously in the balance. The very foundation of this criminal enterprise often revolved around various rackets, the lifeblood of illicit income. Consider the protection rackets, a systematic scheme demanding a percentage from local businesses, restaurants, bars, construction sites, ostensibly for security from unnamed threats, often orchestrated by the protectors themselves. It was rarely cinematic extortion. Instead, it was a relentless cycle of negotiation, constant, discreet monitoring, and chilling reminders of consequences if payments ceased. For the boss, this meant ensuring these operations ran efficiently, that collection agents were effective but discreet, and that money flowed consistently up the chain. It was an unending cycle of administration, dispute mediation, and volatile human resource management, perpetually tinged with the awareness of its illegality and the threat of exposure. Then there were the gambling operations, from clandestine card games to elaborate bookmaking rings. These demanded intricate logistics, securing discrete locations, managing runners, balancing vast ledgers, and ensuring prompt payouts and collections. It was a high-volume, often low-margin business, requiring obsessive organization to maximize profits and minimize exposure. The boss bore the crushing weight of every loss, every problem, every detail that could compromise the entire operation. It was a business built on numbers and human weakness, and anything but glamorous. Money laundering, perhaps the most outwardly boring, yet vitally important aspect, was a constant, deeply mundane, and mentally taxing chore. The vast sums generated by rackets couldn't simply be deposited. They had to be cleaned, funneled through legitimate-looking businesses to obscure their legal origins. This involved devising complex schemes, investing in front companies like laundromats or construction firms, fabricating invoices, creating shell corporations, and manipulating financial records. For the boss, this meant constant, high-stakes consultation with corrupt lawyers and accountants, setting up intricate paper trails, and relentlessly seeking new avenues to inject dirty money into the legitimate economy without raising red flags. It was a mind-numbing exercise in financial deception, a continuous struggle against the ever-evolving tactics of financial investigators. The glitz of millions in cash was swiftly replaced by the headache of how to make it appear legal, a tedious, high-stakes game of creative accounting where a single error could expose the entire criminal empire. Beyond these operational details, there were the endless logistical nightmares inherent in other dangerous enterprises. Drug trafficking, for instance, involved coordinating massive international shipments, managing sprawling distribution networks, securing precarious supply lines, and dealing with ruthless criminal partners. This was a complex, brutal, global supply chain, fraught with international law enforcement, rival cartels, and the inherent volatility of illegal substances. The boss bore the ultimate, crushing responsibility for every kilogram moved, every dollar earned, and every life lost. It was a logistical nightmare of epic proportions, requiring meticulous planning, tight security, and the ability to adapt to constant changes and threats. The daily life of a mafia boss, stripped of its romanticized facade, was far from grand pronouncements. It was about managing an incessant barrage of phone calls, endless clandestine meetings, mediating violent disputes, approving collections, and always thinking several steps ahead about legal implications and potential betrayals. It was a constant mental burden, a form of high-stakes, perpetual corporate management, but one far removed from the safe world of legitimate business. The business was just that, a business, albeit one with far deadlier consequences, involving more stress, more clandestine paperwork, and infinitely greater existential dread than any Fortune 500 CEO could ever imagine. The illusion of absolute power quickly faded into the grim reality of running a massive, inherently illegal corporation. It truly was a job that, in its day-to-day reality, systematically sucked away any shred of peace, leaving only a hollow, soul-deep exhaustion. Having navigated the treacherous labyrinth of internal betrayal, where trust was a luxury and paranoia a constant companion, one might imagine the life of a mafia boss to be a continuous drama of high-stakes power plays and cinematic showdowns. Yet, beneath the veneer of illicit glamour and whispered legends, much of the boss's existence was consumed by something far less thrilling, the relentless, often tedious, and profoundly stressful business of crime. This wasn't the stuff of thrilling novels. It was the unglamorous, day-to-day grind of managing an illegal enterprise, a bureaucratic nightmare cloaked in intimidation and violence. Imagine a workforce where rivalries weren't settled by HR departments, but by brutal displays of force or the looming threat of them. As the boss, you were the ultimate court of appeals, the final word in every petty squabble, every territorial dispute between your capos, every argument over a cut of the illicit profits. These weren't intellectual debates. They were volatile, often explosive confrontations, demanding a finely tuned sense of psychology, an unwavering resolve, and a readiness to make harsh examples. The mental energy expended in mediating these disputes, in listening to accusations and counter-accusations, in discerning truth from calculated deception was immense. Each conflict you resolved, each solution you imposed, further solidified your power, but at the cost of immense personal strain. You became adept at reading unspoken threats, at understanding the subtle shifts in allegiances, and at knowing precisely when to offer a compromise and when to unleash chilling, decisive punishment. This constant arbitration wasn't leadership. It was crisis management, perpetually on the brink of erupting into open warfare within your own ranks, demanding a vigilance that never truly allowed your mind to rest. The disputes could range from a trivial-sounding territorial overlaps in gambling rackets, two crews muscling into the same neighborhood's numbers game, to far more serious matters, like a capo withholding a percentage of profits or a soldier overstepping his authority in a way that insulted another powerful family. Each of these situations, no matter how small they seemed on the surface, carried the potential to destabilize the entire organization, igniting a chain reaction of violence and retribution. Your role was to be the unwavering anchor, the unchallengeable voice of authority, and the ultimate dispenser of justice, a justice often swift, brutal, and utterly devoid of mercy. The weight of these judgments, the knowledge that your decree could lead to a man being ostracized, severely punished, or even disappeared, was a constant, heavy presence. You were not just a manager. You were a judge, jury, and executioner in a legal system of your own making, a role that slowly but surely stripped away any remaining pretense of normal human empathy. The enforcement of rules, or maintaining order within the organization, was a tireless, often thankless task. Omerta, the code of silence, wasn't merely a tradition, it was a fundamental pillar of survival, and its violation carried the most severe penalties. But enforcing it, and countless other unwritten laws, required constant vigilance. You had to ensure that tributes were paid on time, that territories were respected, that discretion was paramount. This meant a continuous cycle of warnings, threats, and ultimately violence, to remind everyone of the consequences of stepping out of line. The psychological burden of authorizing such actions, of knowing that your word could lead to severe beatings, disfigurement, or even death, weighed heavily. It was a dark, corrosive responsibility, slowly eroding any lingering vestiges of empathy, forcing you to view your own men not as individuals, but as pieces on a chessboard, to be moved, sacrificed, or punished to maintain the overall order. The silence that followed your commands was not born of respect, but of terror, a chilling testament to the power you wielded and the lengths you were willing to go to preserve it. This need to maintain order through intimidation meant that a boss could never truly be off-duty. The watchful eyes were always upon you, not just of outsiders, but of your own men. Any perceived softness, any moment of hesitation, any display of genuine human emotion could be interpreted as weakness, an invitation for others to challenge your authority. The persona of the ruthless, unflinching leader had to be maintained at all times, a mask that became increasingly difficult to remove, even in private. It was a performance that demanded every ounce of your mental fortitude, a constant draining of your emotional reserves. The act of enforcing fear, day in and day out, left you utterly exhausted, not physically, but spiritually. It created an environment where genuine connection was impossible, where every interaction was framed by power dynamics, leaving you profoundly isolated even when surrounded by dozens of your closest associates. Even a simple family gathering, a moment that should be filled with warmth and ease, became another stage where the boss had to project an image of unshakable control, lest any perceived crack in the facade invite internal challenge. The continuous mental strain of being this perpetual enforcer and arbiter took an immense toll. Imagine the weight of knowing that your decisions directly impacted the lives, and often the deaths, of countless individuals. Not just rivals, but your own family members. Every time you sanctioned a hit, every time you approved a severe punishment, a piece of your humanity was chipped away. The lines between right and wrong blurred, then vanished entirely, replaced by the cold logic of self-preservation and organizational dominance. This erosion of your moral compass was a quiet, internal catastrophe, leaving you with a profound sense of emptiness, a spiritual vacuum that no amount of wealth or power could ever fill. You became a prisoner of your own making, trapped in a cycle of violence and fear, with no clear path to redemption or peace. The relentless pressure to resolve these problems meant that your mind was never truly at rest, even in moments of quiet reflection. It was a constant hum of calculations, threat assessments, and the planning of preemptive strikes or punitive measures, all designed to maintain an unstable equilibrium in a fundamentally chaotic world. This wasn't the celebrated image of a shrewd strategist gracefully navigating political waters. It was the grim, relentless reality of a man burdened by the psychological weight of constant conflict resolution and the brutal enforcement of self-made laws. The exhaustion wasn't from physical labor, but from the unending internal calculus of threats, loyalty, and retribution. It was the deep weariness of a soul stretched thin by a life of calculated cruelty, a perpetual state of ethical compromise. The business of crime, in its truest and most unvarnished form, was not just about making money. It was about the systematic destruction of the self, leaving a boss with a hollow victory, a reign built on quicksand, and a mind perpetually trapped in a state of weary, soul-crushing alert. This inescapable treadmill of enforcing order through fear, of constantly arbitrating disputes that could turn deadly at any moment, was a core reason why the life, when stripped of its superficial glamour, truly, profoundly, and irrevocably sucked. After navigating the relentless internal strife and the ceaseless external pressures, after enduring the soul-crushing mundanity of the business of crime, one might, in a moment of profound weariness, dream of an escape, a quiet exit, a departure from the shadows, a return to a life unburdened by fear and suspicion. Yet, for a mafia boss, this dream was perhaps the cruelest illusion of all. Once you stepped through that gilded doorway, once you swore the oath, you entered a realm from which there was, in practical terms, no legitimate exit. The family was not merely an organization. It was a pact sealed in blood and silence, a binding commitment that transcended individual desire, a life sentence without the possibility of parole unless that parole was granted by the cold embrace of death. The concept of omerta, the code of silence, was far more than a simple rule. It was the very bedrock of the Mafia's existence, a spiritual and practical chain that bound every member. Breaking it meant not just personal ruin, but the unraveling of the entire fabric of the organization. And thus, its violation was met with the most brutal, unforgiving reprisal. For a boss, omerta was a double-edged sword. It protected your secrets from the outside world, yes, but it also ensured your eternal confinement within that world. To speak of leaving, to even entertain the thought aloud, was to invite suspicion, to be seen as a potential threat to the collective silence, an unforgivable transgression. The life didn't just demand your active participation, it demanded your absolute, unwavering and eternal silence, a silence that extended even to your innermost desires for freedom. Imagine the suffocating weight of this reality. Every morning you woke knowing that your choices were severely limited, not by walls or bars, but by an unseen, unbreakable covenant. The life you had chosen, with all its perceived power and illicit wealth, had, in turn, chosen you, binding you to its will with an unbreakable grip. To betray this bond, to seek freedom, was to condemn yourself to an agonizing, hunted existence. or more likely, a swift and brutal end. There was no retirement plan, no quiet retreat to a sun-drenched beach with your ill-gotten gains. The only way out was to be carried out, either by the authorities in handcuffs or by your own men in a casket, a chilling truth that stripped away any illusion of genuine autonomy. You were, in essence, a slave to the system you helped create, a prisoner of your own making, forever tethered to its dark demands. This inescapable entrapment was often reinforced by what could only be described as the golden handcuffs, the very wealth and luxury that drew so many to the Mafia life, the lavish homes, the tailored clothes, the expensive cars, the constant flow of cash. These were not badges of freedom, but rather exquisitely crafted fetters. The immense financial empire you commanded, built on countless illegal ventures, required your constant oversight and protection. To abandon it was not an option. The family would never allow such a vast, lucrative enterprise to simply dissipate, and your knowledge of its inner workings made you too dangerous to simply disappear. The money, the status, the comfortable existence, all came with an unspoken, non-negotiable price. Your perpetual presence, your unwavering commitment, and your ultimate sacrifice. The more wealth you accumulated, the deeper the golden handcuffs dug into your wrists. A legitimate person could sell their assets, move to a new city, and start fresh. But for you, every asset was tainted, every investment a thread in a vast, illegal tapestry. To liquidate it without raising suspicion from law enforcement or without inciting a feeding frenzy from rival families was an impossible task. Your fortune, rather than providing options, severely limited them, locking you into a lifestyle that demanded your constant attention and your perpetual readiness for conflict. The illusion was that wealth bought freedom. The grim reality was that illicit wealth bought a more ornate, more comfortable prison cell from which escape was practically unthinkable. Consider the psychological impact of being bound by these golden chains. You might possess immense material comforts, but true inner peace, the quiet satisfaction of genuine choice and autonomy, remained forever out of reach. Every luxurious item, every symbol of your success, served as a silent, mocking reminder of your gilded cage. You could buy anything except the freedom to walk away, the peace of a clear conscience, or the simple anonymity that most people take for granted. This wasn't merely a lack of options. It was a profound existential trap, where your very success in the criminal world became the mechanism of your ultimate enslavement. The paradox was agonizing. The more powerful you became, the more visible and indispensable, the tighter the grip of the life around you, ensuring that any dream of a peaceful, legitimate retirement was nothing more than a fleeting, impossible fantasy. It was a life where the grand promises of power and riches dissolved into the grim, unvarnished reality of eternal servitude. The perceived choice to join the ranks of the Mafia was, in truth, an irrevocable, one-way decision. A Faustian bargain where the dazzling allure of command was exchanged for an inescapable, lifelong commitment to paranoia, violence, and profound isolation. This wasn't a world of open doors, but one of carefully constructed traps, where even the most powerful boss found themselves, at the end of the day, a prisoner within their own domain, bound by the very spoils of their illicit conquests. This unyielding, binding nature of the life, where even wealth became a tool of entrapment, was a profound and undeniable reason why being a Mafia boss truly, unequivocally, and irrevocably sucked. The golden handcuffs, therefore, were not merely a metaphor for financial entrapment. They were a very real, tangible limitation on every aspect of a boss's daily existence, especially when it came to the illusion of personal freedom. Imagine, if you will, possessing the means to acquire any luxury, to visit any exotic locale, to indulge any fleeting desire, yet being perpetually tethered to a shadowy world that dictated your every move. This wasn't the freedom advertised by wealth. It was an elaborate self-imposed prison, cloaked in silk and velvet, but a prison nonetheless. The very opulence that defined your success became the most formidable barrier to a life lived openly, peacefully, and without the omnipresent shadow of danger. Consider the simple, universal pleasure of travel. For most, a flight to a distant land is an escape, an adventure, a chance to shed the burdens of daily life. For a Mafia boss, it was an intricate, high-stakes logistical operation fraught with peril. International borders, once symbols of exploration, became treacherous minefields of immigration checks, customs officials, and the ever-present risk of Interpol alerts. Even within your own country, domestic travel was meticulously planned, often involving multiple, circuitous routes, layers of security, and the constant fear of surveillance. You couldn't simply book a flight under your own name. flash your passport without a second thought, or wander through a bustling foreign market soaking in the atmosphere. Every journey, no matter how short or how seemingly mundane, transformed into a clandestine movement, a meticulously choreographed ballet of evasion and vigilance. The world, for all its vastness, became an increasingly smaller, more dangerous place, a series of pre-approved, monitored corridors rather than an open canvas for exploration. Living openly, without aliases, without the constant need to obscure your true identity, was an unachievable dream. Every public appearance, every encounter with someone outside your immediate, trusted circle, carried the risk of recognition, of a face from the past, or a new, unwanted connection that could unravel years of careful construction. Dinners and public restaurants, once a symbol of power and influence, became tense, uncomfortable affairs, where every new face at an adjacent table was scrutinized, every whispered conversation a potential threat. You ate quickly, spoke softly, and were always the first to notice the subtle shift in a waiter's gaze, the lingering look of a fellow diner, the simple act of signing a document, making a purchase, or engaging in any commonplace activity was a dangerous performance, demanding meticulous attention to detail to avoid leaving a traceable mark. Your true name, your true face, became a liability, a vulnerability you ruthlessly guarded, forcing you to live in a perpetual state of carefully constructed anonymity, even when surrounded by those who ostensibly admired you. Even leisure, a precious commodity for respite and relaxation, was tainted by an unceasing vigilance. A quiet afternoon at a secluded villa, a private yacht cruise on crystal-clear waters, a round of golf at an exclusive country club. These moments were never truly peaceful. They were strategic locations, carefully vetted, heavily guarded, and always with an escape route pre-planned. The feeling of being trapped, even in luxury, was profound. The very walls of your lavish retreat, designed for comfort and privacy, felt more like the confines of a cage, protecting you from external dangers, but simultaneously imprisoning you within. You couldn't simply take a spontaneous walk through a local town, browse a bookstore, or enjoy a sunset on a public beach without a phalanx of watchful eyes, a convoy of security details, and an internal alarm system perpetually set to its highest sensitivity. The pleasure of the moment was always overshadowed by the practicalities of security, the fear of exposure, and the haunting awareness that your vacation was merely a temporary change of scenery for your ongoing imprisonment. The psychological toll of this constant state of guardedness, even in leisure, was immense. The simple joys, the quiet moments of reflection that nourished the human spirit, were systematically eroded. You yearned for genuine spontaneity, for the freedom to make an unplanned decision without consulting a security detail or weighing the myriad of risks. Yet, that yearning was always met by the harsh reality of your life. The opulent golden cage, with its endless amenities and its breathtaking views, offered everything but the one thing you truly needed: genuine peace and unburdened freedom. Every lavish meal was eaten with a side of suspicion. Every luxurious bed slept in with one eye open. Every beautiful landscape viewed through the distorted lens of potential threat. The illusion of grandeur quickly dissipated, leaving only the cold, hard truth of an existence where every comfort came at the cost of your soul's liberty, and where the most beautiful surroundings could not erase the persistent, gnawing fear of being discovered, attacked, or ultimately brought down. This gilded cage, meticulously constructed by your own hands, brick by expensive brick, around your very soul, was a constant, suffocating reminder of why the life, despite all its outward show, truly, unequivocally sucked. After dwelling on the psychological torment of the gilded cage, the ceaseless internal betrayals, and the relentless external pressures, the grim, unvarnished truth for most Mafia bosses was not a dramatic escape or a glorious retirement. Instead, it was a profound descent into an even deeper, more inescapable form of confinement, a federal prison cell. The luxurious estates, the tailored suits, the expensive cigars, all dissolved into the stark, monochromatic reality of steel bars, concrete walls, and the chilling clang of a locking door. The perceived power, the control over lives and empires, vanished in an instant, replaced by the absolute helplessness of a numbered inmate. This wasn't a choice. It was the almost inevitable conclusion to a life lived outside the bounds of law, a predictable, crushing end to the illusion of untouchability. Consider, for a moment, the high likelihood of this outcome. While Hollywood often glorifies defiant standoffs or cunning escapes, the vast majority of those who ascended to the pinnacle of organized crime eventually found themselves facing a judge, then a jury, and finally, a sentence that measured their remaining life in decades, not years. The relentless work of law enforcement, the wiretaps, the informants, the meticulous financial investigations, all converged into an undeniable body of evidence. The game of cat and mouse, once exhilarating in its danger, eventually concluded with the capture of the mouse, often in the quiet, pre-dawn hours, far from any dramatic flourish. The moment of arrest itself, usually a mundane event devoid of grand gestures, marked the definitive end of an era, a final, irreversible shift from being a feared ruler to a humbled, helpless defendant, stripped of status, power, and ultimately, hope. Imagine the deafening silence of a prison cell after a lifetime of commanding legions. The deference, the whispered respect, the instant obedience, all gone. Now, you're just another number, another face in a sea of forgotten men. Your daily existence is dictated by the precise, unfeeling rhythm of institutional bells, by the orders of guards, by the arbitrary rules of a system designed to strip you of individuality. From making life-or-death decisions that affected entire cities, you're reduced to negotiating for an extra spoonful of sugar in your coffee, or the right to make a brief phone call. The contrast is jarring, a brutal psychological shock that few truly recover from. The loss of freedom isn't merely physical. It's a profound existential stripping away of every vestige of the self you once knew. Every sunrise brings not a new opportunity for conquest, but simply another day in an endless, unchanging routine, a monotonous landscape of regret. The very essence of freedom, once taken for granted, becomes an agonizing memory. The ability to step outside and feel the sun on your face, to breathe fresh air unpolluted by despair, to simply walk wherever your feet desired, these are now distant, unattainable luxuries. The world outside, the vibrant, chaotic world you once dominated, moves on without you. Seasons change, children grow, technology advances, but within the concrete walls, time stands still, a cruel, mocking reflection of the years slipping away. Privacy, once a privilege, becomes a non-existent concept. Every moment is observed, every letter read, every conversation potentially monitored. The constant surveillance you once feared from law enforcement is now an ever-present, inescapable reality, a pervasive intrusion into your final, dwindling moments of personal space. This is the ultimate, bitter irony. The man who craved control above all else now has none, utterly at the mercy of a system that cares little for his past power. And what of the family you claim to protect, the loved ones for whom you justified your brutal choices? They, too, suffer the profound consequences of your imprisonment. The emotional distance, once a protective barrier, now becomes a physical chasm, traversed only by brief, supervised visits through a pane of glass, or carefully vetted letters that carry a fraction of their true sentiment. The fear you once shielded them from is replaced by the shame, the stigma, the quiet judgments of a world that now sees them as extensions of your criminal legacy. Your ability to provide, to protect, to even connect on a deeply personal level is severed. The children you once envisioned leading prosperous lives are now marked by the shadow of your incarceration. The weight of their disappointment, the silent accusation in their eyes, is often a far greater punishment than any prison sentence. You are forced to witness their struggles from behind bars, utterly powerless to intervene, haunted by the knowledge that your relentless pursuit of power ultimately brought them only pain and public disgrace. This is the grim tableau of a mafia boss's life ending in prison. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, a slow, agonizing fade into irrelevance. The once feared figure, now a frail, aging man counting the days in a small cell, his empire a distant echo, his family fractured, his legacy a cautionary tale. The illusion of power, once so intoxicating, now reveals its true cost, a profound, crushing emptiness, a life devoid of genuine meaning, and an inescapable confinement that strips away not just freedom, but every shred of dignity and self-respect. It is the ultimate, bitter testament to why, in the cold, unyielding light of reality, being a mafia boss truly, unequivocally, and irrevocably sucked. If the prison cell represented a slow, agonizing fade into irrelevance, a prolonged confinement where time became your ultimate jailer, eroding your identity piece by painstaking piece, an alternative, equally inescapable fate often awaited those who chose the life of a mafia boss, a violent, abrupt, and often undignified death. This wasn't merely a possibility whispered in the dark corners of the underworld. It was a deeply ingrained certainty, a grim promise woven into the very fabric of their existence from the moment they embraced the crown. It was a shadow that clung to every lavish suit, every expensive car, every supposed moment of triumph, a chilling counterpoint to their perceived invincibility that never truly receded. For many, The life didn't conclude with a judge's gavel and the quiet despair of a concrete cell, but with the sudden, deafening report of a firearm, a silent blade appearing from the dark, or the terrifying concussive force of a car bomb on an unsuspecting street. It was the ultimate, brutal contract, paid not with illicit gains or years of freedom, but with the irreversible cessation of breath and the spilling of blood. The constant threat of being taken out was not just an external danger that loomed on the horizon, it was an internal psychological torment that gnawed relentlessly, a hidden bomb beneath every celebration, every strategic victory, every quiet moment of reflection. This relentless awareness meant that genuine peace was an elusive, almost mythical concept, forever out of reach. It wasn't just rivals from other families who posed this lethal danger, fiercely guarding their own territories and ambitions with their own arsenal of ruthlessness. Often, the most menacing threats emerged with chilling proximity from within your own organization. A disgruntled lieutenant, his eyes burning with a desire to usurp your power, seeing your every move as a blueprint for his own ascent. A soldier out for a deeply personal revenge, nursing a perceived slight or injustice for years, quietly plotting. Or a former ally whose loyalty had always been conditional, a mere transaction, finding a new, more lucrative allegiance, turning his back on shared history and whispered secrets without a second thought. The concept of peaceful retirement was not just a cruel joke in this world, but a dangerous fantasy, a notion that rarely, if ever, materialized for those who truly reached the top. You were either serving time, wasting away in a concrete box, or you were serving the life itself, until its violent, self-fulfilling prophecy claimed you in a sudden, brutal act. Every new day was a precarious gamble. Every sunset, a brief, tenuous victory against an omnipresent foe whose identity could shift with the shifting winds of betrayal and ruthless ambition. Imagine living with this chilling, ever-present awareness, a cold, tightening knot in your stomach that rarely loosened, even in moments of apparent calm. Every time you ventured from your fortified home, a fortress designed to keep enemies out, but also to keep you in, every time you entered a seemingly safe establishment, every casual encounter with a familiar face carried the insidious potential for your final breath. The world, for all its vibrant beauty and bustling life, was merely a perilous backdrop for an elaborate, deadly stage, and you, the powerful boss, were its central, yet most vulnerable player. This wasn't the heroic, romanticized death of a soldier falling honorably on a battlefield. It was often a cold, calculated, and deeply impersonal act, designed not for glory or statement of defiance, but to send a brutal message, to eliminate a specific threat to power, or to pave the way, ruthlessly, for a new successor. There was no dignity in it, no honor in such an ignominious end, just the stark, brutal, and often public finality of a life consumed and extinguished by the very violence it commanded, leaving behind a legacy of fear and blood. The methods of elimination, while varied in their execution, always carried a chilling efficiency and a profound sense of merciless finality, designed to maximize impact and instill terror. A car bomb, detonated with remote, unseen precision, could instantly transform a symbol of luxury and power into a fiery, mangled tomb, leaving behind only twisted metal, shattered glass, and even more shattered dreams, a visceral reminder of fragility. A sudden, silent ambush in a deserted alleyway, a series of quick, brutal stabs from a hidden assailant, left no trace but the fading echo of a life abruptly cut short, a chilling testament to the underworld's unforgiving, relentless nature. Or perhaps a carefully planned execution during a seemingly innocuous meeting, where trusted men, once your loyal enforcers, suddenly turned, their faces grim, their loyalties irrevocably shifted, transforming a supposed discussion into a swift, irreversible death sentence. These weren't random acts of rage or impulsive violence. They were strategic moves in a brutal, ceaseless game of chess, designed to be swift, undeniable, and often publicly humiliating, a stark warning to any who might dare to challenge the established order. Each method served to underscore the terrifying, undeniable reality that your life was not truly your own. It belonged to the family, and it could be terminated at their, or a rival's, convenience, with cold, calculating efficiency, often without a shred of remorse. The dramatic juxtaposition between the immense power a boss wielded and their often helpless, undignified end is one of the most poignant and tragic aspects of this life, revealing the ultimate futility of their reign. Here was a man who commanded unwavering fear and absolute obedience from a vast network of individuals, a figure who could greenlight entire criminal operations, who made decisions that impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of lives across entire cities and even states. Yet, in their final moments, they were frequently reduced to mere targets, their once formidable presence dissolving into a sudden, brutal vulnerability, completely at the mercy of their attackers. The tailored suit that symbolized their authority could be ripped and stained with blood, the expensive watch shattered, the powerful hands that once orchestrated so much rendered utterly powerless, incapable of defense or retaliation against the inevitable. The carefully constructed image of the unyielding, untouchable leader was brutally shattered, leaving behind only the fragile, mortal remains of a man whose entire life was ultimately defined and consumed by the very violence he embraced and commanded. A grim testament to the cycle of destruction. This wasn't a peaceful passing in a comfortable, quiet bed, surrounded by the genuine love and solace of family members who mourned a life well lived, a life of meaningful contribution. Instead, it was often a violent, ignominious, and frequently solitary end, whether in a public street, a quiet, unsuspecting restaurant, or even, most chillingly, at the hands of those he once considered his closest confidants and protectors. The carefully cultivated illusion of immortality, so meticulously fostered by the aura of a powerful boss, was brutally stripped away in these final moments, leaving behind only the stark, undeniable reality of mortality in a world that showed no mercy, offered no redemption, and granted no peaceful reprieve. The legacy, in these instances, wasn't one of enduring power or lasting respect, but of a chilling cautionary tale, a grim, blood-soaked reminder of the ultimate, irreversible price paid for a life built on deception, fear, and a foundation of ever-present violence. This relentless, ever-present specter of a violent demise, devoid of dignity, stripped of peace, and ultimately futile, cemented the undeniable truth. Being a mafia boss truly, profoundly, and irrevocably sucked, ending often not in a final command, but in a silenced scream, a final despairing gasp into the cold, indifferent abyss. After the finality of prison, or the brutality of a violent end, what truly remains? Not the grand empires, the whispered legends of power, or the ostentatious displays of wealth. No, for the mafia boss, the grim reality was a broken legacy, a bitter harvest of fear, destruction, and shattered lives. The carefully cultivated image of honor and respect, a cornerstone of the family mythology, was, in truth, a cruel mirage. There was no genuine honor in a life built on intimidation, extortion, and bloodshed. The respect was nothing more than terror, a chilling compliance born of fear, not genuine admiration. What kind of monument is built from such foundations? Only one of desolation, leaving behind not a path for future generations to follow, but a wasteland of moral compromise and human suffering. This was the crushing realization that often dawned in the final quiet moments of their lives, whether in a sterile cell or a fleeting second before a violent end. The profound emptiness of it all, the illusion of power, once so intoxicating, so seductive, ultimately revealed itself as a hollow shell. What was gained? Fleeting control, transient material wealth, and a terrifying influence over others. But what was lost? The list was far longer and infinitely more precious. Lost was the moral standing that allows a man to look himself in the mirror without flinching, to walk among honest men without an internal sense of profound deceit. Lost was the genuine peace of mind, the quiet contentment that comes from a life lived authentically, unburdened by ceaseless paranoia and the shadow of past transgressions. This was not merely the absence of external conflict, it was the absence of internal tranquility, a perpetual storm within the soul. And perhaps most tragically, lost were the genuine relationships, the warmth of true friendship, the unconditional love of family, the simple joy of unburdened connection with another human being. These were the ultimate casualties of the life. Every bond was transactional, every smile suspect, every gesture weighed against ulterior motives. The boss, surrounded by a court of sycophants and opportunists, was utterly, profoundly alone. The very people they claimed to protect were either directly harmed by their actions or lived under a perpetual cloud of fear and secrecy, their lives forever warped by the boss's choices. This wasn't a legacy of family prosperity. It was a legacy of emotional distance, of unspoken pain, and often of direct suffering inflicted upon those closest to them. The grand illusion was of building something eternal, a dynasty, a powerful institution. The stark reality was a trail of destruction, not just for rivals and enemies, but for the innocent, for communities exploited, and most painfully for their own flesh and blood. The wealth accumulated through crime, rather than securing a future, often condemned it, leaving a poisonous inheritance of legal entanglements, moral decay, and a name forever synonymous with fear. The realization of this profound emptiness, this ultimate futility of their life's work, was a bitter pill to swallow. It was the crushing weight of regret for a path chosen, for values forsaken, for a soul sacrificed on the altar of an illusion. This reflection, in the quiet despair of a cell or the fleeting instant of a violent ambush, brought with it the ultimate undeniable truth. The illusion of power was never worth the immense, irrevocable cost. The respect was never genuine. The control, never true freedom, and the life was, in its deepest and most desolate truth, an utterly wasted existence, leaving behind only echoes of fear and the ruins of what could have been. The echoes of what could have been, the silent screams of a life utterly devoid of genuine warmth or peace. These are the true final companions of a mafia boss. For all the outward show of formidable power, the lavish lifestyle, the enforced reverence, the ultimate reality was a profound, suffocating emptiness, a spiritual vacuum that no amount of illicit gain could ever fill. The crushing weight of regret, often unacknowledged in public, yet a constant, gnawing presence in the deepest chambers of their own minds, was perhaps the harshest punishment of all. It was the quiet, internal realization that every choice made, every act of violence sanctioned, every human connection sacrificed, led not to triumph, but to a deeper, more desolate form of personal imprisonment. The crown they wore was heavy not with jewels, but with the burden of a soul lost, forever adrift in a sea of their own making. We have journeyed deep into the shadows tonight, peeling back the layers of myth and glamour to reveal the stark, unvarnished truth. We've seen how the illusion of power was built on a foundation of fear, not genuine respect, leading to a constant, gnawing paranoia. We explored the relentless, multifaceted threats, both from the outside world of law enforcement and rival families, and from the insidious, soul-destroying betrayals from within their own ranks. We delved into the profound personal cage they inhabited, unable to experience true family life, genuine friendship, or moments of unguarded joy, forever isolated by secrecy and suspicion. We even touched upon the tedious, high-stress mundanity of the business of crime, a bureaucratic nightmare cloaked in intimidation. And finally, we confronted the grim inevitability of their downfall, whether through the crushing walls of a prison cell or the sudden, brutal finality of a violent death, leaving behind only a broken legacy of destruction and regret. The narrative of the mafia boss is not one of aspirational power, but a cautionary tale, a quiet whisper in the night reminding us of the profound costs of pursuing control at the expense of our humanity, our peace, and our authentic connections. It's a testament to the simple, profound truth that true strength lies not in domination, but in integrity. True wealth not in material excess, but in peace of mind, and true freedom not in unchecked power, but in the quiet liberty of a clear conscience and genuine relationships. This intricate exploration of why it truly sucked to be a mafia boss serves as a gentle reminder to cherish the simple, often overlooked blessings of an ordinary, peaceful life, free from the crushing weight of fear and deceit. If this journey through the shadows has shown you the value of true peace, quietly let us know in the comments by simply writing "Peace" tonight. It's a quiet declaration and a comfort to know who else seeks this quiet harbor. And if this story helped you unwind and perhaps reevaluate what true power means, consider leaving a like. Your gentle click helps this message of quiet truth reach others seeking solace from the daily grind. To continue these deep dives into fascinating, often overlooked realities, and to join our growing community of thoughtful listeners, subscribe to the channel. It's not just a click, it's an invitation to a continuous journey of quiet discovery and rest. Now, let the echoes of this journey fade. Allow the insights to settle. Take a moment for yourself. Let the melody guide you, and just absorb what we've talked about today. Allow this understanding to deepen as you drift into a peaceful sleep. Our community here finds strength in shared reflection, and we look forward to exploring more overlooked truths with you soon. Rest well.